Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into a collection of sources that offer a massive, ultimate paradigm shift in how we view setbacks. If you're a focused learner trying to map out the real anatomy of success, you're in the right place. We're going to explore exactly how the top 1% of achievers completely reframe defeat. Because as you'll see, instead of viewing failure as the opposite of success, the sources suggest it's actually the absolutely crucial stepping stone to get there.
So let's take a quick look at our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the myth of failure, move into seeking controlled failure, and then check out famous failures made history. After that, we'll hit mortality, the ultimate motivator, the danger of comfort, and we'll wrap it all up with the 1% mindset.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the myth of failure. You know, there is a real tragedy in how we perceive success today. We kind of just assume that for the people at the top, pure talent carried them to the finish line without a single scratch. But the source material makes it incredibly clear. Victory is a product of the fight. The sources draw a really interesting contrast about human behavior here. On the left, we see how the 99% react. They have this deeply negative relationship with failure. When they hit a roadblock, they feel worthless and they just stop out of fear. But over on the right, we see the actual blueprint for winning, failing forward. Successful people don't stop at 1, 10, or even 1,000 failures. They extract the lessons. They use that wisdom to adapt faster, work smarter, and they absolutely do not quit until the dream is a reality.
This whole mindset is perfectly anchored by that famous Winston Churchill quote, "Courage is the ability to go from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm." The crucial takeaway the sources emphasize here is that losing your drive is literally the only actual defeat. If life knocks you down, try to land on your back, because if you can look up, you can get up. You have to courageously hold on to your goal without losing that spark.
Moving right along to section 2, seeking controlled failure.
Okay, so we've established that we shouldn't fear failure, but the source text pushes us even further. We shouldn't just tolerate it, we actually need to hunt for it. The sources define this as controlled failure. It's about getting comfortable living right at the edge of your capabilities, pushing your physical or mental limits to force adaptation and growth. Think about when you go to the gym. You lift weights to the point where your muscles literally fail, right? Because biological adaptation only happens at that exact limit. Practice in any field is basically just controlled failure. You push to your limit until your body and mind make the adjustment, and you evolve.
Which brings us to the bicycle analogy. Think back to when you were a kid learning to ride a bike. It was just failure after failure. You got knocked down, you scraped your knees, but you got right back up because your only goal was to ride. The sources point out that as adults, we hit a roadblock and immediately start making excuses, saying things like, "Oh, well, this must not be for me." The text challenges this directly, arguing that honestly, we just get soft. The advice? Get back on the bike, figure out why you fell, and make sure you're stronger for having learned the lesson.
Let's look at some real-world proof in Section 3, Famous Failures Made History.
If you're still on the fence and think failure is the opposite of success, the sources offer some undeniable historical proof that monumental failure is actually a prerequisite for greatness. Take Thomas Edison. When a reporter asked him how it felt to fail 1,000 times trying to invent the light bulb, he completely corrected them. He didn't fail 1,000 times. He simply found 1,000 different ways it wasn't going to work. Every single time he found a way that didn't work, he was adding to his journey, discovering something brand new, and building his character. Or take a look at Jack Ma's epic streak of rejections. He applied to Harvard and got rejected 10 times. He applied for 30 different everyday jobs, rejected. But here's the absolute craziest part. When KFC came to his city, 24 people applied for the job. 23 were accepted. He was literally the only guy rejected. He went to the police force with 5 applicants. 4 were accepted. Again, he was the only one told he wasn't good enough. The lesson here? Being told no by everyone does not dictate your future, unless you let it.
Breaking it down even further, let's look at what was at stake for 2 massive icons. Imagine for a second if Michael Jordan was scared of missing the game-winning shot. The result? He never would have taken the shot to begin with. Imagine if Steve Jobs was terrified that people wouldn't like his product. The result? No iPhone. If they had prioritized their own safety over taking a risk, they would have completely erased their legacies.
Things get a bit heavier in Section 4, Mortality, the ultimate motivator.
The text executes a hard pivot here, raising the stakes from general motivation to existential urgency. Let me just break the fourth wall and ask you directly, right now, what if you were told you only had 1 week left to live? Would you regret not pursuing your passions? Would you regret not living life to the absolute fullest just because you are worried about what other people might think of you?
The source shares this deeply sobering story to highlight the sheer randomness of death. A healthy, giving teacher, a guy who gave absolutely everything to his community, was on a routine morning bike ride to school. At an intersection, a reckless driver came out of nowhere and killed him instantly on impact. It's tragic, but his death proves a really harsh reality. No matter how good of a person you are, death is inevitable and incredibly random. It could be in 50 years, or it could literally be tomorrow. Tomorrow's not promised to anyone, which means waiting around for the perfect time to chase your dreams is a very dangerous illusion.
Steve Jobs actually used to wake up every morning, look in the mirror, and ask himself questions exactly like this. The crucial point here is that if you're living a life you would not be okay with losing because you haven't done the things you actually wanted to do, then now you know you need to change something. Knowing that our time is limited should be the absolute biggest motivation to make those difficult decisions and jump out of bed in the morning.
And if you need a little perspective on how precious this time is, 1 in 400 trillion. That is the astonishing, almost incomprehensible mathematical rarity of you simply being born. You are in possession of a massive gift. Choosing to live a safe, traditional life out of fear is squandering a ridiculous 1 in 400 trillion chance at greatness.
Which brings us to Section 5, the danger of comfort.
We always hear people talking about the comfort zone, right? But let's redefine it as what the sources argue it truly is, the danger zone. When you get relatively nice and comfortable, you don't want to move. This psychological trap totally tricks you into playing it safe, living perfectly within basic societal standards. And if you let it, society will gladly accept you as a 9-to-5 worker living strictly for the weekend, which the source argues is the absolute worst way to live. The danger zone softly persuades you to just stay put, while your entire life quietly passes you by.
The source tells this visceral, amazing story about old man Robert to provide the perfect antidote to that comfort. He was an 80-year-old man walking with a cane, struggling and taking tumbles in the street. When someone helped him up and suggested he maybe stay inside where it's safe, Robert turned around and said, "I love walking, and I love walking way more than I'm afraid of falling." He was willing to fall 10 times a day just to do what gave him life. Your love for your goal, your love for success must always outweigh your fear of the fall.
Let's bring it all home with Section 6, the 1% mindset.
People constantly talk about how only 1% make it to the top. But just look around. The sources note that the 99% retreat into excuses, run back to safety, and usually give up a month after starting. Only 1% stick with a program long enough to actually see results. Having a 1% chance doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means you cannot behave like the 99%. The 1% mindset means loving success so intensely that you are willing to enthusiastically fail 10 times or 100 times, because you know for a fact that on that 11th time, you will succeed.
The source material leaves us with this lingering, powerful provocation that pretty much dismantles any last excuses we might have. Think about it. If you take a massive risk, pursue your wildest dreams, and totally fail, you just end up back exactly where you are starting from right now. So what do you truly have to lose by taking the leap? The text challenges us not to end up sitting in a rocking chair at 90 years old, regretting the chances we didn't take just because we were worried about what others thought. You have a gift. Tomorrow isn't promised to anyone. Get out there, fail early, fail forward, and jump.